So this week's topic is the principles of offense, which is probably a bigger topic than we can even constrain in 1 week. So I'm going to be kind of giving an overview and talking about some main points, and then we're going to be diving into more of that in detail in the coming weeks. But I like to start with a quote that I got from actually a mentor of a mentor. It was like third level mentoring that was happening. A guy named Hank Smith that was longtime NBA like assistant coach and scout. He was working with the Oklahoma City Thunder at the time I knew him. But he gave me a thought that like gave me years and years of thinking and coaching ideas, which was all of offense is designed to create 2-on-1. And it's like the most fundamental core principle that I've ever found that has really stuck with me. And it's like, you know, leads me to a lot of simplicity because, I guess another pet peeve of mine watching the average practice, the average coach's offense is like, we're going to run this really complex misdirection, triple handoff offense, and then script it so that Johnny over here gets the shot. And it's really like, well, how fast can we create 2-on-1? Because it might be Jimmy has the ball and we space a lot and he drives the rim. And then he scores or someone helps and he kicks it to the guy that the help came from. And that was our 2-on-1. And we can score really fast and really simply and not have to do a lot of instructing. To Chris's point a minute ago, we don't have to complicate things at all if we kind of just boil everything down to that. And it's like a good audit tool in my mind. It's like, hey, whatever we're doing, like we might have gone down this rabbit trail this season of a lot of cool stuff that maybe is working even, and we really like how it looks in practice. But wait a minute, are we getting 2-on-1 efficiently? And is there maybe some chunks of this offense we're running that we could cut out in order to get to 2-on-1 faster or to better fit our personnel and the skills they have? And so that's like baseline foundation I try to come back to as often as possible and just cross check myself. Um, and then from there, what I really arrived at with the age group that we worked with, it's just really like 10 years old to 15 years old, kind of on the outside where we do most of our work. The inner niche of that is more precisely like seventh, eighth, ninth grade kids that are headed toward high school and trying to get them ready. And so I've come to call it my order of operations, which again kind of flows from this more core idea of how do we create 2-on-1. And so the three main tactics, I would call them, are drive and kick, pass and cut, and dribble handoff. And so the way I describe it to players best is again coming from simplicity. If we come down the court with the ball in the hands of our best player, best ball handler at least, if we spread out enough and have space, we want him to just drive. Like we don't have to do anything else. If he's got the ball and can attack, driving is the best solution. And if we take it, how I often describe it is like if we're playing a really bad defensive team, they're probably not good at helping off their man, and they probably don't have a really good on-ball defender. And so he can just drive and break down his man one-on-one, given we have enough space, and he's going to get to the rim and get layups all the time. And then as defense improves, they're going to help off their man to help stop that drive. And then we've got a kick. And we just start from that simplicity. It's like, all right, whoever's got the ball, attack the rim with a drive. And like, let's see how good this team is. And if they get a little bit better, they might pack it in so that the drive can't even get started, right? And they're laying off their man as a team defense or maybe a zone, which is another thing I want to address maybe toward the end of today's call of how do we attack zone. But if they're laying off their man and packing in the paint so that the drive can't happen, then that's where we can pass to a perimeter player because they're sagging off their man to stop a drive. The pass is now open. And that's where our cutting game can be initiated. So now we're passing, we're cutting to get movement and get the defense shifted, and we're opening up other teammates. Even if we don't get the ball in a cut, we're opening up space behind us as they fill behind our cut. And so we can get our pass and cut game going. And then next layer defense, like they're a really good team. They've got a one-on-one defender that can lock down our best ball handler without help. And they're out now denying the wingman. So we can't pass. And for most teams, they're like stuck. If I ask players this, they're like, what do we do? We check up a shot, maybe we call for a ball screen. We're kind of stuck, and the defense kind of knows they got our number. And so that's where I like to use a dribble at, is how we call it. So the the two-part counter move and move are a back cut because they're overplaying our pass. And again, how I set this up is like a logic tree, but if the defender is taking away a pass, they're basically denying us, putting their body between us and the ball, which means they're no longer between our body and the basket, and therefore we take that basket cut, which in this case is a backdoor cut because they're on the top side denying us. And so, all this kind of just starts to flow where it's like, okay, drive, no, pass, cut, yes, okay, no pass, dribble at. And teammate either back cuts or, the counter move to that back cut, if they're defended on their back cut, is then returned to take the ball on a handoff. And I like all of these because it allows the ball handler to initiate action. And so a lot of questions come up around ball screen versus handoff, which I guess two reasons I like a handoff better. One is that ball screens are more common and therefore more familiar to defense to defend them. And B, on a ball screen, we have to wait for the screener to come and get to us to set a screen before we can attack. Whereas dribble handoff is timed and initiated by the ball handler themselves. And so they can come down the floor, make a read. I don't have a drive, I don't have a pass. Okay, I'm turning sideways and dribbling toward my teammate's chest, and I'm initiating action to either push them through on their back cut or get a handoff. And suddenly we're back into motion where that defense otherwise really felt like they had us locked down, right? They had our number, they took away our best driver, and they denied our passes. So that's my quick overview rant. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any questions on that? Cool. And so basically, I try to structure offense based on principles like those and specific tactics. Coach I had breakfast with a couple weeks ago, had used the word trigger concepts, where it's like we have these principles set up, and the whole team knows what's going to happen based on how the defense guards us, kind of like I just described. And so that's really the core philosophy behind what's called conceptual or principle-based offense. So we're not scripting a play where step one, step two, step three happens. We're like, hey, here's these three principles of basketball that we're operating on. If you see this, do this. And if we build that kind of like a logic tree, so we know what the priority is first, then we avoid a lot of the problems where, you know, we tried to initiate this dribble handoff as a first option when the defense wasn't really guarding us in a way where that made sense. And so it fell apart, right? Where we probably could have just got a layup because the defense wasn't guarding that sufficiently. And so the other aspect that really comes out of this is, I guess, comparing it to scripted plays. A scripted play is designed to kind of shortcut the team chemistry you would need to play basketball. Like if you ever, a lot of us have played pickup as adults, and it's still the perennial problem. Like we got five guys with five different ideas of what should happen right now. And so, especially the youth level, the coach's solution historically has been, I'm going to script it. Like, I'm going to give each player a number and give them a job and try to get this outcome. Much like, what the lineman would do in a play for football. Like, you're going to block here, you're going to block there, this guy's going to run through here, and this guy gets, the touchdown or gets a shot in our case. And so basically what we're trying to accomplish with a scripted play is to get team chemistry where we're coordinated, we're not in each other's way, and we get a decent look at an opportunity to score. And so what really happens with the principle-based approach is it happens a lot more, and you actually train players to recognize opportunities, right? And so it's really like you could just chant all season long, 2-on-1, 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 right? It's like we are seeking we are seeking 2-on-1 opportunities to where, the defense is SOL. They are up a creek without a paddle. They got two guys coming at them. One of them's going to score, and they get to choose how they die. And it's like the best thing in the player's experience to always be able to create that, as opposed to having this really complicated scripted offense that might fall apart on step 3 when we are trying to get to step 5 for a certain Johnny to take the shot, right? So it's really by having principles that we can operate on. It's like, an operating system for any other business or computer system in the world. If we have an operating system, we can also kind of shortcut that team chemistry idea. And we often see this, like we'll host a 3-on-3 tournament from time to time in our gym. We like to play 3x3 with the shot clock. And it's very noticeable when we have a team that maybe we haven't even trained. They just showed up for our tournament to compete. And, they've known each other for 6 years and they've played together and they've got team chemistry going on. Right. But it's very rare in our coaching experience that we have a group of guys like that. It's usually like this guy never played in his life. These 3 guys know each other, but haven't played together at this level. And the rest of the squad has played, but not on this team or in, this environment, or never seen each other play together. And so we really need some tools to create that kind of sense of team chemistry where we can coordinate and stay out of each other's way and create space and create opportunities and create advantages and multiply those advantages, which is another topic we'll get into in a couple weeks. But basically, my summary simplification of this is, instead of plays that are scripted team chemistry, we are going for principles that are improvisational team chemistry. So we're operating on a scaffolding type of framework that we can improv inside of. And again, the priority is always turning back to, how do we find 2-on-1 the fastest, right? And that allows us to apply this across all situations. So it's like, well, in a fast break, if we take our defensive rebound guy and get him to do a bust out dribble like Nikola Jokic style, lead the fast break as the big man in the middle, suddenly we got 2-on-1s all the time happening faster,
Mm,
compared to that big guy is constrained and told not to dribble and he waits 5 seconds for the point guard to get the ball before we can fast break. Suddenly our fast break just disappeared. And now
mm.
maybe we have a 5-on-4 at the other end, but our 2-on-1 chances just dropped off a cliff, right? And so
To, to to your point, BJ, like I'm watching 3-on-3, 3v3 on Sunday nights,
yeah.
and it couldn't be any more apparent who understands the principles you're talking about,
Mm,
and the other person who's putting their head down, going to the basket, getting stuffed, and not seeing, the cut, pass, kick,
right.
like like when it's done right, it's unstoppable.
Yeah.
It just is. It just, because you are letting the defense, as you said, starting out, they kind of kill themselves, because at some
Right.
point, the guy that's eating you up, you got to either stop him, double team him, which just creates all the above. And what I'm seeing is, to your last point, is the bigger guys are without question up top. Maybe not the point guard, but those guys absolutely draw everybody out from underneath the basket and create
Yeah.
openness everywhere. If
Right.
you don't do that,
Right.
you're better off with some of your smaller guys, to be honest with you, down, the 3 point baseline, 3 point line area, in order to
Hmm.
create what you're creating to keep the openness going. And
Yeah.
it just it's it's way better basketball, especially at the level, the seventh, eighth grade, and
Hmm.
sounds like fourth and fifth grade. If you do it in the fourth and fifth grade, I'm telling you, you're gonna win every game.
Right.
It's crazy how fast it works, when the kids understand the drive and kick and all that stuff. It's a fluid motion type basketball that is almost unstoppable.
Yeah. No, 2 great points there that just popped in my mind. One is the spacing of 3-on-3 and how big of an asset
Yeah,
that is as a tool, right? It's like we've
yeah,
worked a lot on that together already. But the more you can get players comfortable with a lot of space and time to make their decisions and create action, when they get to 5-on-5, it's a lot easier. And if you can get the big guy comfortable out there, even with some rudimentary skills that they can execute as a perimeter player, in a 3-on-3 setting, then yeah, it's like you really opened up Pandora's box as an offense, because your big guy can catch and dribble at and give somebody a handoff, or keep it and drive and score. And suddenly, when they're out there with the average big guy defending them, it's like they become an unstoppable force. And then the second point that came to mind as you were talking is the aspect of coordination again, where if they really get on the same page of principle based, they really feel like they have autonomy and control in the game. Where I see a lot of players, like to your point with head down driving, it's like they're throwing their body in frustration at the defense because they don't know what else to do. It's like coach is controlling the offense we're running and the squad we've got on the floor. The referees are controlling the calls and the outcome of the plays, and I'm left here just having to take it. Compared to like, hey, we're gonna work on drive and kick this half. Every time you drive, I want you to score unless you see a chest in front of you. And if chest read kick, I think we talked about last week with our tag points. But if you can get that simplicity in front of them, then they're suddenly like, oh, I've got autonomy and ownership here. Like I could drive or pass or dribble handoff to somebody. And now I've got multiple ways to do it. And I've got some control over how this plays out. And I can actually be incentivized to recognize opportunities and exploit them, versus I got to run this offense that coach told me, even though I know it's not going to work. And I'm going to have to give Johnny the ball and he's going to airball it. Right. Which is probably where a lot of our point guards end up. They're just like, oh God, we're running this one again. Coach said we got to run this play. All right, here we go. I'm going to, right. So yeah, giving them, kind of getting their buy-in is the common term, but getting them to have some ownership of, the decisions being made on the fly, just based on some simple principles, can really open up a lot of engagement with the, whoever's the ball handler, especially, but the whole team can kind of get on board with the idea that we got these three concepts we're working within, and coach just said find 2-on-1. And it's like you could really say, like, I don't care how you do it, I want to find 2-on-1 before we score. And suddenly your team is all hunting, how do we find 2-on-1? It's like, oh, fast break, I'm throwing it ahead because those two guys have a 2-on-1. If I keep it, it's going to be 4-on-3, right? And all that can stack up to be really powerful. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions on that?
I have a question, BJ.
Yeah.
And I totally love where you're going with the principles and whatnot. Do you advocate for them to like? I know not running a fixed play, but do you advocate for them to start in a position? How does
Mm,
that get determined? Do we?
yeah, that's a great question. So positioning on the floor, I guess my favorite is to always do a 2-guard front. So you basically have the slot positions, if you know where that is, like between the point and the wing,
Mhm.
kind of a lane line extended above the three. I like to have our point guard, basically 2 guards that are at least somewhat equally capable of handling the ball, and fill to those spots as our first attack, and then have the other 2 outside guys be in the corners, and then you can shuffle that a little bit to be like 5 out, or what we'll talk about a little bit next week, the coming weeks, is doing the inside guy in what's called the dunker, which is basically hiding out behind the backboard and just outside the paint, so that he can rotate into space as a drive happens and the defense rotates. um, but yeah, basically 4 out really wide and high with the slots and the corners filled just leaves us a lot of room when we're going to drive or we're going to cut, and tends to throw the defense off a little bit, who they're used to. The point guard comes down right in the middle and is looking a certain way to make a pass.
Right, right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Any other questions for me there?
So this is more specific, but back to the guy that dribbles with his head down.
Mm.
Where do you, where do you, how do you treat that player in
Mm.
these type of formats?
I would say I would go back to what we talked about last week and incentivize the action or the behavior we want him to do. So it's like
Yeah, during
if
3-on-3, or like when we start the practice or whatever, just
yeah,
say,
so like, it might take
yeah,
some isolation, like we talked about, I guess 2 weeks ago,
yeah,
like practice
yeah,
design, if we just played even 3-on-3, like we're just scrimmaging 3-on-3, he might come to that drive decision, once or twice in a 10-minute game period, right? For that specific player in that specific situation. So we might set it up and like we're gonna play 2-on-1. And so, it's like the basic of what we would work on for drive and kick as a concept. But, he's in that slot position with the ball. He's got one dribble to either score at the rim or kick it. And we've got nobody really guarding him, is how I would start it. So there's no on ball defender, but we've got the help defender who's supposed to be guarding the corner shooter, and basically, we just work that decision repetition where he gets his one dribble, he's going to keep it and score every time he can. And as soon as there's a chest read in front of him, he kicks it and gives his teammate a wide open shot. And then, most players will get it just with that, but you can also like leverage that and say it's one if you score it, it's five if you kick it, and we're playing to six. Right? And so it's like,
yeah,
okay, now I've got it. Right. And defense, maybe you could even say, like, on the defensive side, to make it like a competition, like we'll stay permanent offense, permanent defense. But if you make the wrong decision, so basically, if the defense is able to fake you out and kind of look like they're going to chest read you, but not get there, and you make the wrong decision, then they get a point. Right? And so it's really like I am keeping it. I'm going really hard because I have only one dribble. I've got to go like I'm going to dunk it, is how I like to describe it with players. Like dunk it unless he steps in front of you. And so it's just really hard drive, really realistic finish at speed with a decision involved. And then as soon as that guy flinches in your way, you're kicking it automatically. And so we just kind of program their brain with that all the time, and you can scale that to different angles of the floor and getting more players involved. But if you get that guy making that decision effectively where he can finish correctly when it's open and he will kick it every time there's a chest read, then that really solves the problem in my experience. And just like a couple of weeks of practice, like he's got it and he's going to make that work, especially if the guy he's kicking to is capable of making that shot, right? And that's where skill level on other stuff starts to stack up. It's like if he's kicking it to the seventh grader that can't hit the broadside of a barn as a shooter, then he's probably going to continue making the wrong decision and throw something up himself over two guys instead of kicking it, right? So trying to get our offense flowing so we have people in the right positions to make the right type of shots. But yeah, that's as detailed as I would approach it to try to get him decision reps on making that choice correctly.
awesome.
We're gonna need a lot of that, Mike.
I was just, I feel bad for Chris who's on the line. He's got we got a couple problem childs that we're kind of gonna try and maneuver around, so to speak. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I'm sure you'll start seeing in the 5th grade, 6th grade level is that we saw is there's always those couple kids that might make 1 out of 10 and like, see that 3-pointer, coach, I made? I'm like, yeah, and I
Right.
also saw the 10 you missed, and pretty
Yep.
much cost us the game because we chose not to go to the hole at all,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's that's the other, and they're getting, our kids are 7th, 8th, they're gonna take their share of threes. It's and every kid thinks that they're a 50% shooter, and you can even show them the stats that they're 10%, and they still remember that glorious one shot they made, off balance and falling into the stands. So
Right. Exactly. It's hard to I guess that's the benefit of the incentive approach, like I just said.
yeah, no, I think that's what's been helpful the past 2 weeks,
Yeah.
is kind of gearing the kids more towards the successful, as a team approach,
Hmm.
and getting the ball in the hole rather than, I just made a 3-pointer,
Yeah.
off balance with 2 people on me, and
Right.
it's kind of like that You talked about break it down to simplicity and, just get them to get the buy-in, so to speak.
Yeah. I just got the baby to sleep here, so I'm able to pull up my slide presentation finally. Wanted to run through and see if I left anything out here as we get to our second half hour. I didn't actually tackle the topic of a system, which came from really great mentor of mine I met by chance. Ron Ecker was a NBA coach and a longtime college assistant coach, but he was really an advocate of a system. So kind of like we were talking about with our principles of offense, I think another aspect, another problem that a lot of coaches run into with really specific set plays is that they end up with contradictory systems, right? Where it's like, hey, this offense, you know, Celtics 24 we're going to run has these principles operating under it. But when we switch to, UNH running Maryland's, whatever we're going to call her play, it's a completely opposite principle, right? And so, like on this one, you're supposed to back cut first. On this one, you're supposed to screen for your teammate first. And we just end up with a lot of contradictions in our players' minds, which can stack up to be a really huge problem. Like I see this as one reason I have a job is that players by seventh grade have 7 different coaching philosophies and contradictions in their head. And my job is like just trim the tree. Like, this core concept is good, but you don't need this extra specific detailed, thing that you were doing for that one team. It's like, this is like the core of basketball. And again, bring them back to like, how do we find 2-on-1? Okay. This is a simpler approach. Um, and he also talked about a bigger picture philosophy or system of, building from like, hey, what's your personal philosophy of life? What's your philosophy of sports? What's your philosophy of coaching and specifically basketball coaching? And like, can you stack all that up to have just like the ultimate consistency across everything you're doing so that whenever you speak, you're not having to think about, does this apply to the thing? It's just like flowing from like your personal approach to life, which I think is a huge, powerful concept in itself. And then we already talked through kind of the framework for improvisation and discovering eliminate contradiction. So that kind of ties in with the 2-on-1 idea I talked about. But if you use that audit idea, like, okay, we're mid-season, let's take a look at everything we're doing, or even preseason. Right now would be a great time. It's like you have these 8 ideas that you're thinking about how to implement in your first few weeks of practices. Like, let me just audit those 8 ideas and like where do they actually contradict each other? Where can I maybe just trash one completely that doesn't fit with the other 6? And where can I get everything else like flowing and being cohesive enough that the average seventh grader is going to say, yes, that makes sense. And based on last week, that still makes sense. And coach, I now trust you because you made 3 things that I didn't know connected. You made those 3 connect and make sense. Right. As opposed to the average player is like, coach, last week you said the opposite thing, and now I don't know if I can believe you, and I'm really confused and hesitating when I'm in a game, right? And then the last point I have on here is fight the urge to keep everything, right? We fall in love with certain ideas and topics and plays and even frameworks and principles over time. And I'd encourage you to, do the spring cleaning or the fall clean out in this case before your season. Like, yeah, actually, I loved that idea when I was in high school, but based on the team I have and what I'm trying to do, like this doesn't really make sense. I can hold that for another day. Maybe I'll have a high school team where I can pull that out again. But for now, it's like I'm going for simplifying for the players' sake. So we talked about the 3 offensive tactics. I'd like to run through the visual, some of these. That's what I was hoping to use my slides for. I've got some nice visual of each of these concepts in action. So drive and kick, I've actually started using some symbols to go with these. So I call this the circle concept, drive and kick, which is basically all the teams moving around the perimeter in relation to the drive. And the fundamental rule that I try to hammer into the player's mind is whatever hand the ball handler dribbles with is the direction I should move. And so we're not watching which move direction they're making around the court. They're not even watching what the defender does. If I'm the shooter and not the ball handler, I'm watching the hands of the man dribbling the ball. And if I get binoculars on his hand tells me where to go. And that's how we can really get a great quick reaction time and stay in sync a lot better. So some of this is already obvious because we talked through it a bunch, but what does it do for our team? I like to think about it like a traffic circle. It gets teammates out of each other's way, right? The ball has right of way. If you were mid cutting, then your job is to get the heck out of the way of the drive and clear that space. One thing I really don't like, I see a lot with players, is if they're in the paint anywhere, whether they were posted up or they just finished cutting, they will try to step into a ball screen at like 4 feet from the basket, thinking they're helping their driving teammate, but really they just became an extra defender and brought their defender. And now we got 4 people in that packed piece of space instead of giving their teammates space to operate and finish. Create space to shoot, to cut, to drive by circling outside the 3 point line. And again, it synchronizes all 5 players with only one rule, right? So, like, if we were to do nothing else for our offense, like, say we're like Chris's age group, like we're 7 to 9 year olds, I would just do this for like the whole season. Like, we don't really need to do much else. We're probably not going to be strong enough to throw great passes. Dribble handoff may be helpful, but it also gets a little complicated, and the defense is probably not good enough to justify it. So let's just drive everything. And if the defense overhelps, then we know how to kick it. And that could be our single rule for the whole year. And then what does it do for our individual player? It creates really wide open drives, right? Like, I like to call it the parting of the Red Sea. Like, when you drive and your teammates are moving, pulling defense away, it's suddenly like you're left looking around expecting somebody to guard you, and nobody does, and you get a free wide open layup. It creates the magic 2-on-1 situation, right? The impossible decision is what I call that. What we're trying to put the defender in is always the impossible decision. And then it gives each player a clear cue to look for, right? What do we look at to tell them where to go? Which is, again, back to the ball handler hand they dribble with to tell us what direction. Second concept, tactic, we talked about. I call it triangle cutting. So this one has its own shape symbol accordingly attached to it. Basket cut. So the 3 destinations, I call them here, is what we're cutting to. So we don't have to have a really long list of different types of cuts. These are like the main components that every cut is made out of, right? And this is the simplest way I've found to remember it for myself and to kind of translate it to players, so they don't have to remember a lot. It's 3 things. We're always going either to the basket, we're going to space, which is away from the basket and the ball, or we're going toward the ball, which is usually called a fill cut around the perimeter, or like a flash cut if you're across the paint. But the destination is move toward ball. And if you get players just thinking that way, it's like, all right, we're trying to create 2-on-1 here, and I could cut basket, space, or ball. And a V cut, for instance, would be a combination of a partial basket cut back out to the space, right? And a fill cut would be anywhere along the perimeter, I'm running toward the ball cut. So really just filling space to shorten the pass and create an advantage. I'm sure you guys have probably yelled a lot in practice at players that they should be stepping toward the pass to catch it, right? And this is one way to solve that problem. Like, you can't catch it as a stationary target. You got to be filling toward the ball, shorten the pass, and be on the move, and hopefully create an attack opportunity out of it. And so I did a little diagram here, which you guys are experienced enough to probably get already, but this kind of just highlights how this really works. If I'm in the slot or the point and I pass to my wing, I'm going to cut to basket cut. Then I'm going to cut from basket to the weak side corner to space. And, a lot of players will actually, if I ask the question, if they're here, I'll ask the question, where is the most space? And often they'll point to this side, which there is some space here. And in 5-on-5, that may be the necessary space they need to occupy. But we want to try to prioritize their mind and where is the most space, right? Like, if I had a player here and a cutter here and a teammate filling already, then this corner is far more open space than this corner. And then you can get into, if you get here, your defender's here, this guy can no longer drive because we're clogging up his space, compared to we're over here, your defender has to help at the rim, and now you're the most open shooter. Like, incentivizing being in the right space with the most space possible to create an advantage there. And then again, the ball cut. I often set this up. Like, you get to the basket, where do you go next? All right, you get to the corner, for whatever reason, the ball's stuck here, where do you go next? And they'll pretty easily connect that. Like, I got to run toward the ball to fill this space and get back in the action if I want to get the ball back in my hands. Any questions on that? think you guys got that concept pretty fundamental to basketball in my mind, at least. So reasons to cut. It's another just kind of framework to give players to think through it. So if you pass from the middle toward the sideline, this might be one of the first contrarian ideas I can try to explain how I think about this compared to most people. So I guess what I should say to start this is I see a lot of problems with overcutting, where there are no limitations on who should cut or win. It's always be cutting, and coaches are yelling, move. And the players are moving all over the place. They don't know when or why or where, but they're moving. And we just get in each other's way. And, really the outcome is we're cutting so frequently, there's no space to catch a pass on a cut. And because there is always a cutter or two going through the paint, there is no space to drive. And suddenly we end up in this perpetual motion machine offense. It's like it's motion, like we're moving, but we're not accomplishing anything because we're moving at the wrong time or we're moving too frequently and we end up in each other's way. And so one rule that I've established that really helps with this is based on the pass. So basically, we want the passer to cut when possible, but we have some rules to kind of constrain that so that we don't get everybody always cutting and getting in each other's way. And so if you pass from the middle toward the sideline, so like we just demonstrated, a pass from top of the key or slot toward the wing means you should cut. And we kind of think about it like a flow of water where we're cutting down the middle, out to the corners, and filling back to the top. And it's like a two-sided flow stream going on. But if we passed from actually don't have this on here. So if you pass from the sideline toward the middle, you would not cut, with the thought there being that you just created a better advantage by passing toward the middle of the floor. And we want that guy to drive, in which case we connect back to our drive and kick circle. We want him to drive, and we're going to react to his drive around the perimeter instead of cutting and then getting in his way potentially as he drives. Um, if you're in the paint, cut to space. That one's pretty obvious. Although a lot of players will hang around like they think their teammate's going to shoot, or they're being told to rebound, maybe preemptively, and so they end up staying in the paint too long, and they're actually in the way. When we want them to be instinctually like, "I'm in the paint, didn't get it, I'm out. I'm getting to space as soon as possible." And then you're away from the ball, cut toward the ball. So again, fill cutting. And the fourth one, which we'll get to more in a second, is a back cut. If your defender turned their back on you, cut to the basket, right? And I was talking through this verbally. I'll give you a visual of that in a second, but on the dribble handoff is the same concept. But if you can get an average middle school player to adopt this idea, like if I see the back of my defender's head, they're staring at the ball. It means they're blind to me. I can go wherever I want. I'm going to cut to the basket because that's the best advantage I can create. And at the level of defense we're playing against, whatever age group you are below high school, this is going to happen a lot because defense is just not that good. So then our third tactic is the dribble at again. So two actions we can do. One is a back cut, which is the primary move. I always like to think about the decision between a move and a counter move. We got to figure out which one is the primary first. So they're not just equal options and I got to look back and forth and decide. It's like I'm always doing this one until the defense triggers me flipping the switch, and I do the opposite. Right. So I talked through this verbally, but the defender's out of position between you and the ball. They're not between you and the basket, therefore back cut takes you to the basket. And then the handoff is just a counter move. So here's the visual I was wanting to use to show this. So this would be, like I talked through the order of operations, this would be really good defense. I don't have my X here, but we got a lockdown defender here. We got a denial defender here. We're trying to get this guy the ball, and they think they got our number. So we can't pass, but if we dribble at them, they can back cut. And what I like to talk through with the teammate here is like you could back cut anytime, but the chances are this guy's not ready to pass to you yet. So again, trying to get the team chemistry, trying to get us in sync with each other is like just wait long enough until he dribbles toward you and then back cut. Because the chances are at that point, this defender is stepping out to make sure he denies whatever's going to happen trying to get the ball to his man. And while he's stepping out, you go in and like he never recovers. That is a destroyer of a back cut. So it becomes a lot of just working on the patience and timing of that. And again, tying it back to the ball handler able to initiate it, right? If he dribbles at it and we understand this principle, he's expecting this cut and ready to throw this pass. And the chances of him cutting at the right time and actually having a pass arrive to meet him are greatly increased compared to, again, this guy just back cutting because he sees his defender overplaying. Back cutting anytime could work, but back cutting in sync with your ball handler means the ball's probably getting to you a lot better. Right. So again, I think about this like a logic tree. I'm talking through with players. He's between you and the ball, cut to the basket. You could do it anytime, but now we're in sync with the ball handler. It's getting to us. So when he's denying, we dribble at him. Back cut is our first option, and some players will get confused on which side of the defender the pass needs to go, but we want to throw it on the top side of the defender. We're calling this the back side where he's cutting. Back cut, we want top side pass. So usually a right hand kind of cross body bounce pass is what gets it there between our defender, who's probably here, and this defender that's denying our teammate. Does that make sense to you guys? This is kind of
Absolutely.
second nature to me in a way. So I can visualize all this exactly how it happens on the floor, but hopefully my drawings are making sense there.
I
Um,
think timing's the big part that you said.
yeah, timing
Getting
is
kids
really key. Yeah.
as they grow up, they get excited to know the play, and then they're not
Mm,
patient enough, and
yeah,
then it kind of ruins itself, especially at the
totally.
fifth, sixth grade level. It just kind of like you got them trained to
Yeah.
do the right thing, and they're
Mhm,
become a motion sensitive team, but they're not
mhm.
waiting for it to develop long
Right.
enough or too quick or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, that's
I think
kind
that's
of
a great
the
point.
special sauce, so to speak.
Yeah. Right. No, I mean, it's like you said, they know the play, they know the ball's coming to them, and it's like, ooh, I am amped up, excited, and I just left the building 3 seconds early because I knew it was coming, and actually the ball handler wasn't even ready yet, and we blew it up and didn't get the pass to happen. All that. The same happens with screening, of course. I'm sure you see a lot. Is if I'm the screener and I know I could get open after the screen, I'm like bam and run away before the guy actually came and used my screen because I
Hmm.
thought I was going to get myself open, right? So it really becomes a patience game, and I talk about a lot. Um, I guess few different aspects, but cutting and moving in our driving kick circle, especially if you can, if you can be on time, it doesn't matter as much whether you're quick or not. So, like from an athletic perspective, a lot of fast athletes, I think, suffer more from this idea of being too early because they're like super athletic and speedy and able to do it, right? But often they're so fast they didn't actually give the defense time to react in the way that would allow them to destroy the defense. And so they went early and like fought the defense and maybe made a great athletic play, made something work. But if they were just a little more patient, make let the defense reaction happen and then go, then they're so much more uh, advantageous. They're creating a lot bigger, better opportunities to score. And so it takes some work for sure, to recognize what is the right action and then to refine it to right action at the right time. Like that's it's maybe a couple of seasons of work with some players, especially. So our counter move here is then the handoff. So I call this the two-step test for the wingman here that's starting to back cut in two hard steps to the rim. He's going to know if he's going to get open or not. And typically, if he's got a good defender on him, they'll stay with him on that, right? He's going 1-2, just outside the edge of the paint. He's guarded. And so instead of continuing any longer than that, he can read it and come back around and get the handoff. And then basically from here, it's much like a ball screen. That defender is trailing him around the handoff. He gets the ball, and he's basically got momentum going toward his left hand here, toward the middle of the floor, which we want him to just drive any chance he has. And we can create all kinds of different things on the weak side of the floor based on that. Just creating our 2-on-1 advantage again by taking a player out on the handoff action. So driving is the primary action, and I actually have another rule I didn't really lay out in here, but I call it the rule of opposites, where any two-man interaction like a ball screen or handoff or even a screen away from the ball, we want the screener or the handoff delivery man is what I call him. We want him to go opposite the way the ball went. So one of my pet peeves with ball screens especially is that we drive and we roll into the same space. And so maybe we'll create a 2-on-1, but we have no space, right? There's two guys here and a defender between them 4 feet apart. And there's like not much going to happen. So the rule of opposites just means if he drives in, I want this guy to go out to the corner and be a shooter. And now we're really creating not only 2-on-1, but 2-on-1 with space, right? And so we would call that a pop, just like pick and pop or screen and roll versus screen and pop. We want the ball handler to go in if possible. Screener or delivery man in this case would pop out and just destroy the defense by pulling them in two different directions at once. And then let me go back up to that. The opposite can also happen where the defense will switch or even double team the ball and kind of push them out of the paint over here. And then we want the delivery man to roll, just like we would do on a ball screen. But that's another layer of this that really makes it effective, is to not have the ball and the screener always attacking the same space, but instead attacking opposite space. So this is the order of operations. I already talked you guys through kind of going from really poor level of defense up to a denial defense where we really need the dribble at to solve the problem. The individual mindset can also use the same approach with an order of operations. So very common situation. We talked about week one, the frequency, what happens most frequently a game. One of the things that happens a lot is you catch a pass. And so we work on the order of operations being shoot first and drive second. Like, you're never going to get a better quality shot than right when you catch a pass, assuming you can get the right space and the right footwork and everything lined up. Like, we want you to shoot it first and drive it second. And then the question that always comes up is, what about passing in that situation? And I can get into more of that maybe a different week, but basically I try to build the context of what happened before the catch to help determine that. And so if it's a kick, then I would shoot it or swing it, because the ball just came from the paint and all the defense is near the basket. So I don't really want to drive it again because the defense is kind of there waiting for me. If it's a swing pass around the perimeter, then I want to shoot first and drive second, right? Because the ball came from sideways, came from space. And if I can't shoot it, then the paint is probably open and I can drive it. And so I did a lot of brain work on this over time with some of the behavior specialists I know, and actually did some white paper type presentations on binary decision making for basketball. But basically, using the context of the game situation to boil it down to only two options. Right? Our hesitation as coaches is, basketball is chaotic. We should have, maybe five options available if we think about all the things. But if you can really distill it down for your players to, like, these are the best two, and again, they're not equal even, it's like on off switch, we want to shoot it first and drive it second, then basketball becomes much more simple and therefore faster for them to make decisions and attack. And then we can also build in, again, from the context, drive away from the pass is one of our universal rules. If we catch a swing pass from my left and I'm on the right wing, my point guard passes to me from my left side, I don't have to think about, should I drive right or left? It's like, if I'm not shooting it, I'm driving right to attack the space away from the pass where there's less likely to be defense. And so we can build all those up to be just simply shoot or drive away from pass. And then the secondary decision can happen after we attack. So let's say it was shot or drive. We decided to drive in this case, and we don't have to think about shoot, pass, or drive all at the point of the catch. We can shoot or drive. And then if we drive, now it's a different decision, back to what we were talking about with Mike in the drive and kick. It's I finish or I kick to a teammate, but only after I've engaged that second line of defense. And therefore, a secondary decision needs to happen. Right. And so you can just kind of chunk that out. It's like, hey, we can get good at just this decision: shoot or drive, shoot or drive, shoot or drive. Okay, now it's drive every time. We're automating that first decision. And now in the middle of your drive, is it finish or kick, finish or kick, finish or kick? We can get good at that decision. We can build, I call it a decision tree, kind of like you talk about in the business world, but you can build multiple layers of decisions just doing two options at a time. And again, using the situational context to drive what is the primary option, number one, and what is the counter move, number two, and what's the trigger that we need to see in order to change our mind. And really just gives players a huge amount of confidence and, again, autonomy, because they know what option one is all the time. Like, they never hesitate to shoot when they're open. and they know exactly what they're looking for to flip the switch and drive. They don't have to be looking around thinking about it. And the way I like to contrast that is, it's if you take the approach, which is almost universal in coaching, that you should be thinking about shoot, pass, or drive. The problem is there's four teammates that you could pass to. And so what I see a lot of players doing is they're actually looking at seven options, right? They're looking at, should I shoot? Should I pass to any of my four teammates? Should I drive right or left? And by the time I evaluate seven possibilities, the play is over. Like the defense is locked on me and maybe even ripped the ball out of my hands because I was sitting there thinking about it. Right. And so you'll see players just freeze up is kind of what we see as parents and coaches, but they're really trying to consciously evaluate seven possibilities that they've been given as their job before they do anything. And suddenly they're never open to shoot. They passed up a lot of open shots. They never drove it when they had an advantage. And even their passes are probably getting picked off all the time because they were so slow to evaluate seven options mentally that the defense is like locked in, took three deep breaths, and is ready for anything, and they destroy them pretty easily. You guys ever seen that or have an example of that happening in your team or with your players?
All the time.
All the time.
Agreed.
Yeah,
every time. Yeah.
every time. Yeah. So I think it's one of the greatest gifts that we can give players is just like, hey, there's only two options here based on again all this context we're stacking up, which is back to my funnel model we talked about week one, right? Is like we're building like here's the game scenario, here's the decision we make, here's where our teammates are, and now here's the decision. And then they're like, oh yeah, pass came from there, shot or drive. Makes sense. I can do that. And I'm just working on those two options. So yeah, I really think it's a huge lever to get players comfortable with that type of decision. Again, taking that from what happens most frequently in a game. Like there might just be like two or three of these really specific situational decisions they need to get good at. And suddenly, like your whole team is starting to take shots when they're open and drive when they have advantages and kick when there's help coming. And like, we don't really need a whole lot else. It's like I shot an open catch, I drove an advantage driving on a layup, or I drove and defense came and I kicked it to the next guy who shot a wide open shot without hesitating. Right. And it's like, suddenly we just created the 2024 Celtics offense and we're scoring 100 points a game as an NBA team, right? Or whatever the equivalent is at your level is like, I think middle school teams, maybe Mike and Alex can speak to this. What's the average is probably like 30 points in my mind for a middle school game, right? 30, 40. Does that seem about right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, this kind of game, you might find yourself just like we scored 55 points this season on average by just doing this much. Right. It's just like that much simplicity made the efficiency of the players just incredibly different. It's cool. All right, let's talk about how to apply the principles to zone. I've been looking for validation from some of my coaching buddies ahead of this week to talk about this. I know we're at 2 o'clock actually. Do you guys have to jump off or you got a few more minutes?
I can hang
I'm
for a
good for
couple
a few more
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah, I'm
All
good.
right, I'll go quick here, but basically I haven't coached a team using a zone in several years, and my thinking has evolved a lot since then. And so I was kind of pinging some of my coaching buddies that are active team coaches, like, how are you attacking this? Like, does this actually work the way I think it does, in a real team setting when you're playing good competition? And yeah, basically I got to adopt a couple new ideas and terminology to share with you guys, but really just again validated kind of how I would approach this, which number one is not change anything about your attack from how you attack man to man. Is like what I see the biggest issue is most of the time is that if we ask a coach, what's the purpose of a zone, they're going to say force the other team to slow down, swing the ball around the outside and shoot threes, right? And then if we ask a different coach, how does your zone offense work? And they're like, well, we swing the ball around the outside and we shoot threes. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're playing into the defensive hands here by settling for what they want you to do. And at the middle school level and below, it's like we don't have great shooters. So if we're not hitting threes, like we are going down the tubes here in a heartbeat. because we don't have a good strategy to attack. And so basically the fundamental rule that changes with attacking a zone is just what is the destination of your cuts, right? And we could talk about drives similarly, but with cuts especially, players are used to cutting, like we just talked about, cutting all the way to the basket or all the way to the perimeter or all the way back to the ball, right? In our triangle framework. And really what changes with the zone is that there are gaps in the zone that don't have a permanent location on the floor. They're fluid between the players that are playing defense, and they're also not as long of a cut, right? So instead of going from the top of the key all the way to the basket, I'm probably going to the middle of the lane line, right? Between the elbow and the block is probably the gap that I need to cut to. And also as a passer, where I need to throw to. And so it's really just changing, where are those short corner outside the paint, baseline, middle of the paint, center of the free throw line? Like, where are those pockets or gaps of space that show up fluidly as the defense rotates? And can we get our players comfortable cutting to those gaps instead of trying to cut all the way to the basket? Second one is short, quick bounce passes are the greatest weapon, right? You'll see players try to throw chest passes. They're just getting deflected all the time because there's so many defensive arms in the way. You'll see lob passes, just take too long in the air and getting stolen or not being caught. Again, because we're not typically cutting to the right location where there isn't a gap or an opportunity. And so trying to think about short, quick bounce passes as our greatest weapon. How can we maybe make 3 passes to get somebody at the rim at the end instead of one cutter and one longer pass that met them at the rim to get a layup? Drives should happen from inside the first line of defense. So, for instance, like I just said, if we cut to that gap just below the elbow and catch it, then we can probably drive 1-on-1 against the big guy in the middle of the zone from there. But we're not likely to drive from the wing all the way there, and we're not likely to cut from the top of the key all the way to the basket. It's kind of a two-part attack. So, cutting the gaps and driving from inside that first line of defense is where our greatest attacks tend to happen. And this was a great one I borrowed from my buddy Ben Chase, who coaches, has been a longtime women's college coach. He now runs his own program in Massachusetts. But screens should be set against your own defender to prevent them rotating to cover your teammate that is coming into your zone, essentially. Right. So if you think contrast this with man to man, is how I
Mm.
ended up grasping it from him. In man to man, I am going to screen my teammate's defender far from me and hoping that he's going to break free with some speed and get open out of that. And in zone, it's just a different philosophy, different tactic. I'm going to screen my own defender who's right here next to me and do that in time with my teammate who's running into this zone that I'm already occupying. And I'm just preventing that defender from rotating where he would need to be to meet and defend my teammate. And I think that is a very powerful concept that, if implemented, could be really, again, kind of thinking of this list is like all you need to run a good zone offense. If you have that alone as a screening team, you're just going to get some really good shots from screening the zone ahead of the rotation that needs to happen. And then
And
number
ball
five,
handoff.
yeah, ball handoff be the same, right?
Yeah.
And then otherwise, all principles still apply, right? You can still attack with a drive, maybe get a free throw line catch, and then face and drive. Maybe our dribble handoff happens in the short corner toward the wing guy that's cutting behind the defense, right? Maybe our cuts need to happen, like I said, they're a series of cuts to get the ball where we need it to go instead of happening all at once with more space and speed. But really taking the philosophy, like we're going to attack these guys and destroy them so badly that they don't want to play zone anymore and they got to get out of it and try something else. Right. And that's like my favorite thing, whether we're doing that against a press or in a half court, is like whatever special defense they just pulled out of their pocket to try to change things on us. Like we just annihilate that in the first 3 possessions, then they're like, well, forget that. We're gonna go back to whatever we were doing that was not working already. And press break can be similar. And actually, he pointed out, my buddy Ben pointed out that this can very easily apply to your press break idea as well, where you're not cutting all the way to the basket against a press break, you're cutting into a gap. you're using short, quick bounce passes, cross court diagonal passes are my favorite rather than really long sideline or cross court passes. And you're probably driving after we get the ball in bounds and get behind one line of defense. And again, screening, even in a press break, you could go screen the guy that's supposed to rotate to the next space and actually leave the ball handler open or the next cutter open. And so I'd love to get you guys kind of thinking about how to apply those five and implementing them this season, because like I said, I have not coached a team in a while where I got to implement my newest evolution of thinking about this and really see how it works and troubleshoot it. So summary again, big three offensive tactics and the order of operations, main stuff we covered today. I know that was a lot. I'm gonna do the recording again. I'll edit that and try to get it out to you guys by this weekend so you can watch it and or listen to it back and see if there's anything else you can grasp from it. If there's any other questions or ideas that come up, I'd like to keep kind of the flow we've established here, starting out with reviewing last week, any ideas that came up before we tackle the new stuff. So next week, we're going to tackle defense, the three pillars I call contain, contest, and rebound. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the math behind how and why the defense can drive your best offense. Basically, just building on the idea I talked about today of the fast break from a rebound to create better 2-on-1 and how that really stacks up to make your offense a lot better efficiency wise by having a really solid defense.